Good evening, friends, and welcome to the Journey to the Future at the Career Shifts podcast. Some guests leave behind insights, others leave behind a shift in how you see the world. Jon Younger, we did an episode last season, the episode number 11, and it went absolutely viral in my sense because it kind of gave us perspectives about future of work. Um, but for me, this episode today is not just any other episode. It's more like a reunion. John has been a friend, a mentor, a guide since 2020, one of the most generous minds I know, and one of the few global voices who make you feel seen, not small. He shaped how I think about talent, work, and purpose. And more than once, he's reminded me that real leadership sounds like calm, clear, and kind. So when John messaged me earlier this month, Gopal, I would love to return to your show and share what we are building at mensch.work, which, of course, has a new brand name as we speak. I didn't have to think twice. Because once again, John isn't seeing the future. I mean, he's actually building it much before we do. This is the time, this is a whole experience, not just about shift in the way we work. So it's not just about freelancing, which is what we focused on the last episode. This time it's AI, but with a very human core. Mensch.work is his new bold venture, a platform building custom AI agents for fast growing and mid sized businesses, not generic tools, not one size fits all bolts or bots. It's digital teammates built actually to reduce the chaos that the leaders live by every single day. In our conversation today, what I hope to cover is why most mid sized businesses are still left out of the AI revolution, how AI agents can go from gimmick to game changer, what it means to lead in a world where your next hire actually might be digital, and why the future of work must start with trust. This isn't just any other episode about technology, it's about clarity. It's about building better communities, better companies without burning out the humans inside them. And it's about doing it with care, courage, and curiosity. So, John, welcome back to the Career Shifts podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you. Doing great. We are on our last week in. For those of your audience that know the area, we're on our last week at Cape Cod, which is a little spit of the land outside of Boston, jutting into the Atlantic. It's a wonderful place to enjoy part of the summer. It's a wonderful place to experience the beach and to be with friends and family. And if I may say so, eat lots of lobster. It's pretty cheap here. So we're very excited about the week left, but even more excited about the podcast this morning. Thank you, Gopal, for the invitation to be back.
Absolutely. And I know, the last episode that we did, I think it was all about agile talent, the book that you wrote, all about the future of work, which is more about gig economy. We did touch about a bit about AI as well, if I'm not wrong, and if my memory serves me right. But I think a lot has changed since episode number 11. We are sitting on episode number 48 today as we speak.
Wonderful.
And my hair has gone from black to gray.
Not that much.
Not that much. Someone did point that out the other day to say that, oh, there's a lot of change. Well,
mine is truly the gray.
Yes. So I think in the last conversation that we had, people would have, learned more about who you are, for sure. But for whatever has changed in the last year, especially the kind of interesting work that you do, could you spend some time in walking us through what's changed and what's the new thing that you're building?
Sure. And as you said, there's been a rebranding from mensch.work to Voyager AI com. And we've got a new website up. It's new as of yesterday, and I hope people will take a look at it. You know, I started Voyager AI in November, and honestly, I had just completed a year and a half's assignment at Catalent, an organization that I think you know, and had been collaborating with Pat Petiti, who's their CEO. And that work had come to a close. It had been really a lot of fun. And I think we really helped as we created a new designation for consulting called Consulting 2.0, which is really the freelance orientation of consulting. And I was trying to figure out whether I was going to retire or go on to do something else. Gopal, I've had the good fortune of taking a couple of companies public. And so we've got a roof over our head. We've got food at the table, and our grandchildren seem to like us. So all of the stuff in the world said, why not retire? And I just couldn't do it. I didn't know how to do it. My impression is you're not any better at it than I am, but we'll see in the future. I've got a few years on you. So I started thinking about what I might want to do, and with Alvaro Oliveira, the fellow who had been the first employee of TopTal and was a very good friend and a wonderful technologist. Alvaro and I started to talk about what we thought might be the first mile or the last mile rather, in transformation implementation consulting. And so we put it together, an idea around how that would work, et cetera. And then what happened in February, March, and we had gotten started and we were generating some interest. We were connected to Pedro Donati. Pedro Donati was a colleague of Alvaro's in Brazil. And we started talking about the idea of AI as an alternative to that last mile in transformation consulting. And the logic was kind of this, AI kind of replaces the last step of traditional consulting. You go strategy, then you go macro design, then you go micro design, then you go workflows, and then you implement. But you can do the last 2 or 3 of those steps at the same time with AI agents. And that was a knock on the head of tremendous proportion. And the 3 of us started to build this little company that's now become Voyager AI. The focus of it is improving the efficiency, as you said, of fast-growing and mid-sized companies by automating repetitive routine workflows. We call that crappy jobs. If you think about the numbers of people that are doing crappy jobs that don't feed them intellectually, that don't give them additional skills, it's just repetitive and routine. Gee, that's an awful lot of work, and it's an awful lot of workers. And we thought that there was an opportunity to, as Pedro would have called it, to empower and free them from the constraints of repetitive routine work that just is mind-numbing. But the other is empower them to do more important, interesting stuff. And if I use the example of IBM, and we'll come back and forth to some examples, IBM recently put out a report saying that it had not only saved $3.5 billion by automating these repetitive routine workflows, but it had saved 3.9 million hours of employees' time that could be used to do something better, that could be used to develop, that could be used to train, that could be used to create, that could be used to innovate, that could be used to initiate. And all of that stuff has driven tremendous value for an IBM, and it can drive tremendous value for many other organizations. So we're finding ourselves attractive to clients. We're doing some pilots. We're doing some projects. We're starting to be paid, which is a wonderful thing. We're revenue positive, which is amazing for a startup that's been bootstrapped in only 6 months operating. So we're pretty happy, and we're working really hard, and we seem to be making some progress in this. So good starts.
Wonderful. I think Yeah, of course, a lot has changed since last year, for
Oh
sure.
my
There is
goodness.
a lot.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I think when we would have done our episode, we were perhaps at ChatGPT 3.5, and today we are at 5.
That's right. That's right.
Just to say
That's right. That's
how
right.
things have evolved.
And an organization in the case of OpenAI that was nonprofit when we did our stuff and now has a value of $500 billion. Wow. I mean,
Wow,
that is extraordinary. So it's been
absolutely.
quite a year. I think it's been quite a year for you and I, and it's also been quite a year for millions of other people around the world, whether politically or substantively in terms of workforce.
Absolutely, absolutely. So people listening live are just sharing their thoughts, their questions, and we will
Welcome.
definitely take each one of them. Welcome to the show, everybody. Love the whole vibe. And before we get into the questions, I have first a very basic question to
Sure.
begin with. If you really talk about AI, I think there is enough and more literature that's available for people to read, understand what does it do across different sections of people. When you look at it, you have general public who are using AI to a certain degree. Some get an integrated AI experience when it comes to working with AI, like Google and Gemini kind of does some part of that work together. Then you have, of course, the chat GPT, the perplexities and the clouds of the world. Um, Without making this an AI conversation,
Hmm.
if I were to really think about explaining AI into, let's say, an academician's world, or let's say even a worker who has not used AI as much, it's a task. And here we are talking about agentic AI.
Hmm.
So, if we were to break this down into simpler terms for people to understand, one, what is it that we are trying to see and do? Of course, we all understand generative AI, but what is changing as we speak? And I know the changes, perhaps when we do our next episode, a lot of things would have changed, I'm sure. but but today, what does these two terms mean for a commoner?
Sure. You know, I think in the simplest terms, um, AI provides a way for people to access either a very large database of information, and that would be the generative side, or they rely on a very specific amount of programming that redesigns the flow of work. Those are the two fundamentals.
Sure.
Um, and then within that, a tremendous number of variations. And so, what you have in the case of what we work on, which is repetitive, routine, crappy job, crappy workflows that can be automated. Um, what we're enabling people to do, not allowing, what we're enabling people to do is to have the help of a coworker. And in this case, the coworker happens to be electronic rather than a flesh and blood individual, but in
Sure.
all respects, a coworker the same. And I'll give you a recent example from one of our projects, one of our clients. This client happens to be a testing organization. It's a large international testing organization that tests a wide variety of products and makes sure that they're fit for use, if I may put it that way. And of course, as you review one of these products, as you do the analysis, as you do the chemistry, et cetera, whatever that is, it becomes really important to identify all of the possible parameters of issue that is important for evaluating this product. Well, what in this case this organization does is it has researchers or analysts taking copious notes on the performance of the product. Those notes, which are handwritten because it's the way they do things, are sent to another individual whose job it is to type it into the computer. Once it's typed into the computer, well, you have access to using it in a kind of researchy way. You can use it for analysis, you can use it for combination, you can use it to assess whether these conditions are different than those conditions. But the starting point is we have wasted an enormous amount of people's time by asking them to type the material that they've read, not very easily read, because many penmanships are not very good. And so they're spending hours and hours and hours putting it in the computer. An AI agent does all that. It just doesn't need the prompt, if I may put it that way, of somebody typing in. It can take the stuff, read it, etc. And that saves hundreds of hours a week. That enables the individual to use their time more productively. Some folks are going to say, oh my gosh, does it mean that they'll lose their job? And in some cases, routine repetitive work will cause the loss of a job, but not necessarily the loss of employment, because many of these people are going to go on to more interesting work because they now have both the skills and the background and the tool support that an AI brings. So I think that what we've learned, Gopal, which is very important, is that AI can't be used or seen to just destroy work. It has to be used and seen to uplift the work of workers while performing automation activities that reduce wasted time and effort.
Yeah. Very interesting. And I really like the way you kind of distinguish between job and employment, because in today's day and age, there is a lot of chatter about, I think last year when we started this conversation, it was about ethical AI versus unethical AI. And today, I think we have progressed from that to talk about would AI take away jobs, and would AI take away employment? And both are different. But
Yes.
I think, as much as we want to believe that there is a lot of, and I'm playing a devil's advocate here, right?
Sure.
As much as we may want to say that this is what is going to happen, and as a result of, how things will unfold, you will definitely have a situation where companies will feel overwhelmed to
Sure.
be able to understand how this is going to unfold.
Yep.
How is it that we are, as community, industry, company, in whatever way, trying to solve for clarity in this space? Because I think there is a lot of confusion in the whole ecosystem. What would your views be?
We are. Think about how much the world has changed as a result of what ChatGPT presented only 2 years ago. I mean, wow. And if you sort of think about the adoption curves, right? We know that adoption is increasing. We know that it was faster for the internet than it was for color TV. We know it was faster for color TV than it was for the automobile, etc. But while the adoption curve for AI has been very robust, it's still very new. So one of the things that you'd find, to your point, which is a great point, is that a recent study by MIT, which in fact was just published today, said 95% of AI initiatives haven't moved from pilot to production. Now that's really interesting. So a lot of activity, but not necessarily turning that into a new way of working yet.
Yes.
IBM also found that very few IBM as opposed to MIT found that only 16% of companies in their institute for AI had actually scaled anything in AI enterprise-wide. So what's in the way? And we know that the first thing that's in the way is an awful lot of people don't know what to make of this stuff yet. AI is not exactly the same thing as IT. We're talking about the end of software as we know it, which is the fundamental of IT organizations. And now we're
Absolutely.
talking about low code and no code kinds of activities, and they're blowing it up. If I may give you an example from my own history and then turn to the AI stuff. In 1984, I was the head of organization development for a very large division of Exxon, for the chemicals business, for the polymers business in chemicals.
I was just learning to walk, by the way.
You may not even have been born then. and my partner in this effort, we were doing a global technology study, and we wanted to make it look good. So we bought an Apple SE, a Mac SE, way back when it was the little square building like that.
Yeah.
And I brought it to Exxon. I was in the research building, and I was a pretty senior guy there. And the IT guy came over, and he was very interested, but also very worried. And he said, "We can't support you. We can't put it on the system." And I said, "That's fine. It's okay to do this one as a separate. We're doing it mostly for graphics." And he said, "No, you don't understand. I can't help you with it." And I said, "I know." People started walking over to my office. They hadn't seen an Apple Mac before, and they wanted to see it. And then they wanted to play with it. And all of a sudden, the tech guys started to come over, and in their off hours said, "Could I try it out?" I think we're seeing the same thing in AI, but at a much larger and as a much more impressive kind of a situation. So people are really interested in it. People are excited about it. We know that a third of the population has tried it out at home. They're asking themselves, how can I get a better deal with groceries using AI, et cetera, et cetera. But we also know there are some things in the way. One, we know there's a great deal of leadership caution. We know that people are nervous about not only putting in AI, which is unknown to them, but committing to multiple years. When you sell an AI agent, you're not only selling the analysis to deploy the agent, you're also selling the servicing that follows it for a year or two or three, whether it's hosted on your system or it's hosted on somebody else's like ours. And so many organizations aren't quite sure they're ready to sign up for multiple years of licensing. Second, employees are worried, and that makes managers worry. Job security continues to be a concern.
Yes.
Now, here's what we know. If you look back at the internet and the days of the internet, what you will see is the same worries. And now in 2025, what we've learned is that for every job lost through the internet, 2.5 jobs have been created. The World Economic Forum anticipates that AI will create a net increase of 97 million jobs.
Wow.
I mean, it's really something. Now, let's assume that it's only half. Let's assume it's only half of half. It's still an extraordinary amount of net new works. So I guess the big message is we're just in very early days. We're just figuring this stuff out. We're just becoming comfortable with it. And it's going to take a while, even though leaders see the potential value. There's a difference between seeing the potential value and jumping into the pool and doing the hard work to make that happen. We're still a little nervous about that stuff.
And the reason why I brought that up in terms of me learning to just walk was perhaps just as an analogy or metaphor here to say that we are just learning to walk in the age of AI. So perhaps we all need to be really mindful about the fact that we don't know what we don't know, but we should be open to learn about things that are coming our way. Exactly. Some really interesting comments out here. One from Rohit Bhasin, where he's asking, will IVR be integrated with all tools to make work more easier in corporate organizations? and their department. Thank you, Rohit. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining.
I believe
Any
so.
thought?
It's again, it's one of those things that seems logical, that seems obvious,
Yeah.
and the question is how and when.
Yeah.
I think we're going to find an extraordinary variety of opportunities to twin AI with all kinds of stuff.
Mm.
Imagine imagine an organization that's been in the business of valuing knowledge. The problem is, what do we do with a knowledge worker in the era when AI provides much more information immediately? And I think that the idea that I read in an article a couple of months ago that I quite liked was that we need to move from knowledge and skill to wisdom and application. And I think it's going to be very interesting to think not only about what do you know, but also how are you going to use that? How are you going to apply it? How are you going to build on it? How are you going to share that knowledge? How are you going to make sure that others understand the implications of that stuff? That's wisdom. I see that knowledge becoming a commodity is a tremendous opportunity.
Wow. This one requires a separate conversation for sure.
It does.
And we can have that separately. I think it's a very interesting. There could be a philosophical take on that as well.
There is. I do think so. I do think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Another question from Funny, who has joined us. Thank you, Funny. Great seeing you here. He said he had read something on interesting on brand new gigs by solopreneurs. So in the future of entrepreneurship, the AI-preneur era, a new breed of entrepreneur is emerging, one who leverages AI as a key partner in building and scaling their businesses.
Exactly.
And as a co-founder, what will AI as a co-founder rather, it will be interesting for you to share your views on that.
Sure. Happy to do so, and thank you, Penny. The guys at Gigged AI, Rich and Craig, good guys, two Scottish entrepreneurs, created just a little visual sometime earlier this year, and what they said is the future of work is going to be determined by three communities. There's an internal talent community within any organization.
Mm-hmm.
There's an external talent community within any organization. And then we think the third is going to be AI. So if you sort of think about that, there's internal folks, external stuff, folks that support the internal people, and then the AI. The next question is, how do you divide? And the answer is that you want to keep internally the folks that are really providing the strategy or the strategic stuff of the organization.
Yep.
There's a variety of work that any organization can pass on to external sources, and there are a variety of benefits to doing that. In terms of for the individual, it's an opportunity to work in several organizations rather than one, which creates greater security, but it also creates more learning. It's also good for organizations because they're able to manage their costs much more effectively. If they only need a little bit of work as opposed to a full-time person, they can do that. And AI is a kind of accelerant, if I may, for performance in both of those capabilities. So why have I brought that up? I think what we're going to find over time is that the percentage of internal full-time employees in any organization will drop. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen in 5 years. We've been waiting over the last 15 years for freelancing to sort of take over the world, and it hasn't.
Yeah.
But what we will see is the need for fewer internal people and the need for more people who bring external skills that can help an organization to scale or pivot. And then I think we're going to see the AI providing support to both of those. So what'll the future of work mean? It's the same as the future of work in Voyager AI. At this point, uh, without, without the AI, we'd have more employees, but we're not ready for employees. So this is actually fabulous for us. We will be ready for more employees in the future. And when we are, we will have an infrastructure that supports them. But the reality of the future is, a ratio, I don't know what that ratio is, of AI agents to individuals, whether they're external or internal. If they're internal, it'll be organizationally provided. And Microsoft has a wonderful story about the future of work that I encourage you to involve. Actually, the guy you ought to think about for another chapter of this is Dave Gartenberg, who used to run HR for Avanade, used to run HR for Slalom, and used to be the head of HR for much of Microsoft. He's got a wonderful way of thinking about this stuff. We'll also find in organizations that external folks will have their set of AI agents. If people have a chance to do so, I encourage them to read an article I wrote about 2 years ago that interviewed a bunch of consulting platforms, management consulting platforms like Cattle and many others, and asked them how they thought AI would change their business. And the answer that they described more than many times was that it provides a variety of tools to help individuals to be as if they had an organization, as if they had an army. And one very small example of that I can give is on a weekly basis, if you're an individual consultant, an individual creative, an individual IT professional, you're now in a position to connect with your clients and potential clients on a much more regular basis, because one, AI is able to facilitate the logistics of that.
Sure.
Two, AI is able to help you when you do a podcast like this one to turn that into an article, to turn that into a presentation, to turn that into another podcast. So there are tremendous opportunities, not only in marketing, but also in production and also in sort of work design within your organization, to think in terms of fewer internals, more contingents, and a lot more work that's provided by AI. That's what we're doing, and I think it's a measure of what's going to happen more broadly.
Very interesting. Funny, I hope that kind of answers the question. Feel free to share your thoughts as well. I have a few more questions that have come in, but I want to ask a very related yet important one that we typically often don't speak that much in public, but more about in coffee chats or water cooler conversations. So let's break this down into two. One is the skilling of people. And when I say skilling of people, it's not at the pace at which it has to be.
Right.
What that results into is a lot of unpreparedness from an organization standpoint to take decisions which are perhaps not in favor of the employee. Of course, there are numbers that are published which talks about layoffs that are happening as a result of all the changes that are being done. There are much more that is happening even otherwise. So that's a very important challenge that we are seeing already, but we are not talking about it as much as we would want to.
Yes.
There are two aspects to it, right? One is the organization's aspect, whether they need to think about this differently than they have been. Perhaps they are doing everything that is possible to be able to help people scale and all of that. But there is the other aspect, which is, are people doing enough to be able to adapt to this change? What would your thoughts be on, because as much as we talk about, and I wrote two words here, which you were talking about, in an ideal world, we would want 90 more percentage of people being freelancers and gig workers and less percentage of people being employees, which is a hope that you and I have had for the ages, and which is why I laughed. We don't let go as human beings. If there is an opportunity, we will hold on to it for as long as it's possible till the time someone is pushing us out. So that's one psychological aspect that we struggle with. In that context, what could organizations do differently in a revolutionary period like this? And what could individuals do differently in a period like this?
You know, there's thank you for that question. It's a wonderful question. And a couple, three things to think in mind. One is that one of the data points from the freelance revolution is that full-time employees spend less time invested in their development than freelancers. Now that kind of makes sense, right? I mean, it makes sense because freelancers are, up against it, so to speak. I mean, they've got to continue to grow successfully, and they feel the pressure. Internal employees are going to feel the pressure, but they don't feel the pressure as much now. And so one of the things that I suggest, that I'm not alone in that, is whether you're internal or external, whether you're new or old, the reality is that the world is changing and you need to change ahead of that change. You need to be at least accelerating your development so that you're able to handle what's coming at your job and what's coming at your organization. The second thing is that you got to think like a freelancer. Half of the folks that are full-time employees these days have a side gig. They're already freelancers in their mind. We called them freelance light. And in the research that we did a few years ago about that, what we found was that their expectations of the workplace are similar to those of freelancers, but they're full-time. Now, we know that's going to change a little bit as people start to get nervous about whether they get to keep their job, et cetera. But what doesn't change are the expectations of their career, their expectations of their work, their expectations of their relationship. So organizations have to respond to that. And they have to respond to that by recognizing that top employees, top talents, always have options, always have choices. And so what are you doing to help them to stay engaged? What are you doing to help them stay equipped? What are you doing to help them to stay strong? Third point, and here's my favorite one. In a world where hard skills are becoming more commoditized, soft skills become more important. And so
which are actually the harder ones.
Say what?
Which is actually the harder one.
It is the hardest. It is the hardest. So what are we talking about there? We're talking about when employers talk about new employees and what they feel as though is missing in those new employees, they're talking about time management. They're talking about communication. They're talking about teamwork. They're talking about strategic thinking. They're talking about managing conflict. In a world of low and no code, in a world where more and more of knowledge can be accessed immediately, having those soft skills, building those soft skills, providing organizations and employees with feedback around how they're doing becomes very important. So as we talk about it, first, employees need to own their development, their continuing development. They take it more seriously. Second, soft skills are going to become more important as hard skills become more available and commoditized through new technology, which means you've got to own that. And the third piece, is that we know that you've got to stay. It's very important to pay attention. And I know that sounds like a silly thing to say, but it's very important to pay attention to what's happening in the world. And I'll give you one data point around it, which I found fascinating. Several years ago, I was invited to do a series of workshops for HR leaders at a very large pharmaceutical company. And you know what I was fascinated by was, what are they doing when they're not at the workshop, when they're not at their job? What are they doing to develop themselves? And I asked, tell me what you're reading. And there was a groan of silence. And then I asked, how many of you spend at least 10 hours a week studying your craft, whether you're reading about the world outside your business or you're studying about what you do in your living, etc. What are you doing to sort of stay up to date? Nobody answered. Nobody raised their hand at 10 hours. I said, so how about 5? Nobody raised their hand. The average person had spent 1 hour a week sharpening their saw. You cannot sharpen your saw in 1 hour a week. And what was fascinating to me was they didn't feel the threat that was coming at them. Now think about how much of HR is what we would call routine, repetitive, crappy work. And work by Volker and his team at TI, a consulting firm in Hamburg, found that 65%, I think that was the number, 65% of the work of HR can be turned over to AI. Now, if I had that in my head, I sure would want to, stay up late reading and writing and connecting with people that could help me to continue to grow in the HR area. We don't see that yet. We don't see the fear kind of existing in the folks, because they know how to do the routine, repetitive stuff, but they don't know how to do the strategy stuff. Gopal, if I were to ask you, where does HR learn how to build strategic workforces? The answer is nowhere. We know how to administer a workforce that somebody else has built. But the most important piece of HR, which is how do we scale, how do we grow, how do we expand the size and the importance of our organization, and we don't know how to teach people to do that. So we've got a lot of work to do in this area.
Absolutely. I think more conversations on that certainly needs to be done. So we'll keep doing these.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
A very interesting comment from Achyut Menon. Is one thing we know is that AI is here to stay. So how do we coexist? And I'm curious to know if the future of a team is 7 humans and 3 agents. How would freelancers add value? And that's a beautiful question, even from the kind of work that you and I have done in the past and perhaps are now going to walk in towards as well. If organizations are going to have people and a hybrid team of employees and bots or AI agents, what would be left for freelancers to do? I think that's a community of people that we need to also think about.
It's a wonderful question. It's a wonderful question. So if I think about my little company, and here are the skills that I need in my little company. I need somebody that's very good at product design and development. I need somebody that's very good at programming, because the person that's designing the products of the future need to know how to actually put those in place. I need to be very good at selling to clients. I need to be very good at identifying clients, potential clients. I need to be very good at building strategies. And you can create the list.
Yeah.
Now, in the past, you probably had, in the case that was identified, probably have a few product people. I don't need a few product people. I need one, and I need a product person whose job it is to integrate the work of other product people. Second, how many programmers do I need? And the answer is fewer than I needed yesterday. In a world of low code and no code, in a world where AI is writing code actively, I just need less. That doesn't mean I don't need access to great people, but I don't need them on a continuing basis. Third, selling to clients. Well, I want a franchise model that's going to identify potential clients from all over the place. And I want to attract people that are going to do a great job of selling that in. I don't need a lot of full-time people. And if I keep going down this list, I think you get the point, which is that the internal people will be coordinative, managerial, strategic, and they will own areas of technology for as long as they need to until they can pass that on to a contractor. But in the world that we're facing, I think that what we want are not mediocre developers, not mediocre product people, because that's, other than the one great product person we have, that's all we need. So I'm going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to add that capability when I can rent that capability when I need it. And the answer is, of course, I'm going to rent that capability. Why would I do something else? So I think we're entering an era where internal people will be directing the growth of resourcing, but external people, freelancers, can do extraordinarily well in that model, but only if they're very, very good, and only if I know how to connect with them. And
it kind of brings a question in my head about how we, even from a society standpoint, how we have been trained to look at work. Someone would have thought about this, that in order to manage equity, I need to have a bell curve in an organization.
Sure.
Which means you need to have 10 to 15% of top performers, which means your best people. Then you have about 60 to 70% of people who are mediocre or good, but not really the top talent. And then, of course, by default, 5 to 10% would go outside the whole bell curve equation, would be low performers. Are we moving to a stage, John, where because of the way things are being done, the work is being done, if only top people are going to get jobs or get gigs, what happens to the rest of people who are unable to make the cut? I mean, are we talking about a huge avalanche of people who are
Josh Younger,
mediocre or average, and are unable to find related opportunities for themselves?
I have a view around that. And I think the view I have around that is, when we talk about top talent, there are different flavors. And so if you think about one flavor, it's a technological creativity and innovation. And let's take the area of the chief product officer for a moment. Do I need the most inventive technologist, or do I need the best manager of good technologists? And the answer in my world is, I'm not a science project. We're creating AI agents that automate crappy work. It is not the same as trying to hit the moon. And so we are,
as yet.
as yet.
As yet.
As yet. So what I want from a chief product officer is somebody who has access to really good talent when we need it, somebody that knows how to translate what's happening in the market into products that can help us, et cetera, et cetera. I don't need the best technical mind. I need a very good technical mind with a lot of skill around managing other people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the bigger question is not what will happen to the top talents, but I think there's a broadening range of talent that we're going to have to access in some different ways than we have. Do we know all the bits and pieces of how to do that? No, we're still in early days. It's still only 2 years since a lot of this stuff became real. 3 years ago, the only thing we really believed about AI 3 or 4 years was that it made good kind of dumb bots, right? That frustrated everybody from a customer experience perspective. We're now creating much more interesting, much more intelligent, and much more innovative services within the AI agentic revolution. But there's room for a big tent there, and that the combination of internal organizational leaders with terrific external talents doing a variety of things seems like it's the future. Now, what do we have to do to make sure that happens? And I think, Paul, that one of the things that we have to make sure that happens is that we have a safety net for people that fall off.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like yet.
Yeah.
You know, what we know in let's take the case of India. And I'm not very clever, but I'm a little clever. And I know that as of a couple of years ago, there were about 1 million more developers in India than we needed.
Mm.
So now what happens in a world of low or no code? We've got to figure that stuff out. Now, that's for bigger brains than me.
Yeah.
And there are a wide variety of people in organizations, government, and think tanks that are trying to address that. And that's good to know.
Absolutely. While yes, I think there is enough and more being done in this space, I think there is enough. We need to have enough reflection in the space of what needs to be done by individuals as well. And I think that's something that I'll try to, see if there's a small role that I can play in.
May I make a
that.
suggestion? One of
Yes.
the folks who I think may be very interesting for you
Sure.
to have on your show around this issue is a guy named Glenn Hodgson. Glenn is the CEO of what's called Free Trade Europa, and he's been a very strong voice in terms of how governments need to address these kinds of issues, at least within the EU. And I think he's the smartest guy I know about this stuff, and could be very interesting to some of your listeners as well.
Sure. I would definitely reach out and explore the possibility of bringing him in as well. Now, I think one of the things that is very important, again, as related stakeholder, which needs to up its game or roll up the sleeves, is academia. And you and I have had enough and more role to play in that space over the last several years. You a lot more. I, of course, have just dabbled in the last 5 years. No, it's not as much as we would like it to be. AI is still being discussed at a very nascent level, at a very superficial level, not at the depth at which things have to go, not at the amount of, forget the agentic AI. I think we are even talking only at the level of what does it mean for us to get people access to ChatGPT,
Yes.
or the equivalent environments.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the academia also struggles with the fact that there is not enough case study or research being done in this space to be able to say, this is how it used to work, or this is how it works, because it's always what happened in a particular context in that particular organization. And related to that, if you ever encounter a situation like this is how you should react to it. And that's where we are stuck. So we are not doing enough research. We are not doing enough research in a manner that suits the current environment. And the research methodologies are in many ways old and archaic, to be very honest.
True.
How are we going to solve for this?
You know, it's a great question.
How can we?
And I can't provide a solution, but I can provide some examples.
Sure.
I had a wonderful conversation with the people at Cuyahoga Community College. Now, your Indian listeners may not be familiar with the way in which the higher education works in the U.S. And essentially, there are universities
Mhm.
There are four-year colleges
Mhm.
that don't have graduate degrees, but they give out undergraduate degrees. And then there are community colleges, a great many community colleges that tend to be public schools rather than privately held, and tend to offer associate degrees. Many people stop at that point. Other people go on to get their BA or their PhD, et cetera. And Cuyahoga Community College runs a program for aspiring freelancers. I love it. It's free, it's available, they get it.
Wow.
There are many community colleges doing the same thing here in the US. What the US has recognized is that there's just such a mass of people that are side gigging in addition to having a full-time job, or they have a portfolio of several small part-time jobs that they need help. We've recently seen an expansion of that through a company called freelancerclub.net in the UK. And Matt Doherty, who runs the Freelancer Club and was very much of a pioneer around freelance, been around for 15, 20 years. He's been working very hard. He has taken it as a project, a passion project, because he cares deeply, to get universities and colleges in the UK to be more focused on giving people the skills to be freelancers. And so he's working with a number of them, which is terrific. There's a third organization that I see coming up. It hasn't taken a strong view yet, but it will, and it's called Freelance Unlocked. And it started out as a conference in Berlin. It's a German invention by three good guys, who each of them runs a platform. Mark Clemens, Manuel Maurer, and Thomas Moss. And they're good friends. I've spent some time with them. I've presented at their conference, and they also see the need to sort of expand what they're doing to help newbies to create an effective career for themselves as freelancers. And then, as you know, the world is awash in people that are willing to provide private help as coaches for people that are interested in doing that. So we've got a lot of different ways in which we're helping people. But again, it's such new days. Every time we think we kind of figure this out, some new innovation occurs and we go, holy cow, we've got to figure this out again. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah. As they say, I think I don't know. I'll have to go back and check. But after the first flight was flown by the Wright brothers, I don't know how long it took for Boeing or anyone else who would have designed the next aircraft, and people started flying in it. So maybe we are at that phase of
Yes.
changes being seen in academia.
Yes.
And I just hope, yeah.
Yeah, no, one of the things that we forget is that in the beginning of whether it's the planes or the cars or any of these innovations, there's a rush to create different startups that respond to that opportunity. So,
yeah.
For example, I remember that 10 years after the Model T was developed in the US by Ford, there were 300 car companies. Now, we don't remember very many of the 300 car companies, but there were an extraordinary number creating all kinds of new cars. We saw an event a few days ago where they had created a steam car that
Wow.
Yeah, that wasn't driven on the basis of oil or gasoline. It was a steam engine. So lots of things happen. I think we're seeing the same thing today. I mean, I don't think you could throw a stone in any direction without hitting a new startup in AI.
Yeah.
And so I think what we'll find is that over the next few years, and then again the next few years after that, we'll start to figure out what works, what scales, what makes sense, and start to focus on those things.
Well, I just hope for the viewers listening, not just now, in the future as well, they are able to empathize with what we are trying to do and what's happening around them, perhaps as well. I
Sure.
think it's very important for them to get hold of some of these things. And I like one of the things that you said, that I think we need to start learning to pay attention. And in a world which is so distracted, everyone is trying to grab your attention. How are you going to be able to keep at it? I think it's going to be an interesting journey.
Yes.
Um, well, when we chat, I don't know how the time runs so fast. So that's what has happened today as well. And before we kind of wrap up, I think
Sure.
if you could spend some time on maybe, I know you did that in when you were introducing yourself, but if you could just spend some time on what is it that you're trying to solve as a problem through
Sure.
Voyager AI.
Sure. You know, there are sort of two orientations to AI. There's a kind of R&D orientation where these guys are data scientists and they're doing extraordinary things. I mean, quantum computing, I don't even know what that means. I've read it, but it's very confusing.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff that people think about in AI, and they imagine that, we're going to create humanoid robots that will have children and all kinds of weird stuff. and I don't know, maybe, who knows?
Yeah,
I love the British TV show Humans, 2.0. I thought that was fabulous. And who knows? We're taking a different walk. We're taking a different walk on a different highway. We're application oriented. We're not trying to create the next new AI. What we're trying to do is use AI to solve practical problems in organizations. And the majority of those practical problems are that we're asking people to do crappy work that does not uplift them, does not develop them, does not engage them. And as a result of that, we're not very efficient. We're not very effective. We want to replace those crappy jobs, the jobs that are repetitive and routine and low value, and do not grow the individual with automations using AI agents that solve that problem. And we've had a lot of early success that it's very exciting for me. I don't know where we go from there. We've got a lot of crappy jobs to replace. I think we're going to be pretty busy for a long time. And we've chosen to be a custom developer as opposed to creating products and hoping to find clients. We don't know where that will lead, but we know that right now, working with clients who have a use case that may not be the same as another use case, but they're excited to see the change. They're excited to use their people more effectively. They're excited to see greater efficiency. Well, that's plenty for me. So I'm pretty excited about that stuff.
Wonderful, wonderful. Of course, there will be a lot more questions that will pour in post this about use cases for each of the function as well. And I keep wondering, and this may be a chat that we perhaps need to have separately. Would functions look different in the future? Because today I think we are broken down by HR, finance, marketing, but
functions,
more,
totally.
more and more there are proofs that functions across organizations, the walls are coming down because they have to kind of figure out a way to work together. And the conflicting KPIs won't work because you have to be agile and nimble to be able to make things work. But that may be a much deeper conversation that we need to have in terms of future of organizations, and we'll see how that goes. Yeah,
I would love that conversation, and I think that what we're experiencing is the challenge to categories everywhere. The biggest problem, if I may look at myself, I wonder where I should have gone to graduate school in retrospect. Should I have gone to business school? I have a PhD in social and organization psychology, but I should have had some business background, because it occurred to me around my third year of graduate school that I was probably going to be applied rather than a traditional academic. But there was no way for me to do it. I couldn't walk over to the business school at the University of Toronto, where I went to graduate school, and say, I'd like to take a couple of classes. They would say, no, that doesn't make sense to us. So you've really got a challenge at all levels of society, where we're knocking down categories because we're creating new ones, because we're operating in a more systemic world, not a more linear world.
Very true. Well, let's quickly shift gears to, as always, the interesting section of the podcast, which is the rapid fire.
Sure.
Very quickly, in terms of how you see this, if there is one thing you miss about the pre-AI workplace, what is that?
Oh, gosh. The travel, in a funny way, the travel.
Yes.
Because so much of my travel has been replaced by Zoom and Meets, etc., that I don't have as many opportunities to meet people, to find out, for example, Gopal, whether you're taller than me or shorter than me. Who knows? One of the things we don't know when we live in a world of these things is what people actually look like, what people talk like, how they react after you've been with them for an hour or two. So that's the first. Less travel has meant that I've had the opportunity to be with fewer people. And while it's wonderful to be home with family, and I do adore that, I miss the trip to India. I miss the trip to Singapore. I miss the trip to London. I don't miss the trip to Dallas.
Well, what's more powerful, experience or curiosity?
Oh, it's a great question. Curiosity is so much more pleasurable. I have one of my sons was a graduate student in astrophysics, and he's gone on to do some interesting stuff. And he asked me, what do you think is the factor that is most important in your success as a graduate student? And I said, the question that you're addressing. I mean, good graduate students have a good question around research that is worth spending your time on. Did you ever hear of something called the Hamming question? Does that ring a bell? So a million years ago, when I was young, at Bell Labs, where I had been a consultant, a Dr. Hamming would go to different groups, and he was a senior guy, and he would say, what are you working on now? And they would tell him. And then he would say, what are the most important unexplored and unanswered questions in your field? And they would answer that. And he would say, why aren't you working on those? So I think that for me, curiosity is the first step in anything that's kind of interesting.
Wonderful. And I would not have expected to be experienced any which ways, but I still have to ask that.
I hear you.
If Voyager had a personality, what would it look like at a dinner party?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. George Clooney.
Wow.
Handsome, debonair, sophisticated, rich, and eager to talk about his next movie.
Love it. You should take a flip of this and send it to him, maybe.
It's a wonderful question, and I guess I suppose a better answer would be that I feel as though we are application engineers.
Yeah.
Sorry, that we are application engineers, and 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 as application engineers, we know a lot of stuff about how you turn X into Y.
Yeah.
But we're not all that great at talking about the nature of the universe.
Lovely. A leadership trait that's becoming more valuable in the age of AI.
I think it's communication.
Mhm. And one mistake you made while building this startup that turned out to be a gift.
That's a great question, and I think the answer is that when we started, our focus on consulting led to AI in a powerful way. So we
Sure.
wouldn't have gotten there without having pivoted from 1 to 2.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Jon, it was pleasure as always talking to you, listening to your perspectives. I know we are a little beyond time and you're getting frantic calls from people. Uh,
I'm not
um,
that popular. Right.
if there's anything that you would like to share to the audience listening in, what would that be? Any parting thoughts?
You know, I think I would say something very simple, which is we're in the early days.
Hmm.
We are all in the same place, discovering the potential of this new technology and discovering the limitations
Sure.
of this new technology, and we ought not to assume that it's the golden ticket, but we should assume that it gives us the opportunity to do some things differently, to do some things better, and to manage the planet in a more intelligent and thoughtful way. That AI's most important contribution to us, I believe, is the ability to accelerate our understanding of what it takes to live on this planet and not screw it up. I would tell you one other thing before I go, and that is, and I know we'll have to close, but 1 second. There's a fellow named Rudradeb Mitra. Is an Indian fellow. Do you know Rud?
No.
A wonderful guy. He created something called Amdina, and he created it many years ago, when AI was
Still
knowledge of you. He created a wide variety of teams that used AI to solve social and other related problems. The one that I remember is how do you use AI to reduce family violence during periods of famine? Now that's a question worth asking. Absolutely. He is somebody that you might also consider putting on your podcast. He's got about 100 of these going on in different parts of the world. They're all voluntary. He is truly one of the guys who's creating something special with it.
Lovely.
And he is a countryman, and that's important too.
Would definitely try to.
I'll send you all those information on all those guys.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciated the conversation. As always, it was candid. As always, it was, real, and as real as it could get, with calls ringing as well.
Pretty real.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the whole idea of doing this live is to, make it less scripted, make it less perfect, and I think we need to really embrace the fact that there is going to be a lot of these in the real world of work that we will continue to see, or real lives, perhaps, for that matter, right? So, thank you. I think what we did was not just speak about AI, but the whole effect of that on people, academia, psychology, and of course, this is a topic that requires a lot more detailed conversation. So perhaps another conversation is due very soon.
Love it.
Yeah. I think future of work is going to be very interesting, very, very different than what it is today. And what it also did, this conversation, of course, was to, I think people will want to look back and slow down a bit to understand what what's really happening, and perhaps get a hold of what needs to change. Because in a world where there is technology that is moving really fast, faster than a blink of an eye, perhaps, I think what you did was to remind us that it is important to have that clarity.
Thank you.
Clarity matters. Trust still takes time. We will continue to be skeptical about things as we always have been, because that comes from curiosity of whether this is the right thing for us or not. And that just because the future is moving fast, it doesn't really mean that we have to lose ourselves in the speed.
Exactly.
Um, well, what you're building is not for tech for the sake of it, which is, I think, something that we heard. But it also is building something that helps people breathe easier, work better. Because if there is less crappy work, I think it's going to be helpful for sure.
For
And
sure.
of course, the embracing AI would also mean that we lead a little more calm and a lot more careful life, for that matter. So if you're listening to this, or you would be listening to this, and if you're feeling that you're left behind in this race of AI, or are unsure of even where to start, trust me, you're not alone. Maybe the question isn't about how fast you can catch up. Maybe the question is about how clearly can you choose what's worth building in the first place.
Well
And
said.
John, yeah,
Well
you've
said.
always kind of led with clarity and not noise, even from your agile talent days or future of work days. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for showing us what it means to shape the future with heart. And to everyone tuning in, stay curious, stay human, and keep walking towards the future you want to actually live in. Thank you so
Beautiful.
much. Take care.